Welcome to the Franchise Show. I hope you're all doing well and you've had a good week in franchising. I've had a lovely week in franchising. I've just got back from a holiday and I'm back into things now, raring to go. Not really. I don't want to go back on holiday if I'm honest, but still been good. Good to be back. It's always good to be back. So I hope you're well. This is the Franchise Show, and this is the show where we get under the hat of some of the most important topics. That's right. I'm bringing that catchphrase into this show now. That's right. In franchising. So if you are a franchisor, or if you're a franchisee, or an entrepreneur, or if you've just got an interest in franchising, then this is a show where we have a deep delve and a bit of a chat about things. And we take a different topic each week. And we have a lovely guest. And today is definitely no exception to that. We've got a lovely guest right there. And this is a live format. If you are watching it on July the 2nd, between 5:15 GMT and about 6-ish, then it's live. And you can put a comment up there. And we love that. So if you are here, please put a comment up, say hello, and we will get your comments and have a great conversation. So today, the topic is franchise funding. And it's a very important and interesting topic to have a chat about because funding, it's a key element to the franchise journey. And apart from understanding the story and making sure you're aligned, the numbers have got to work. So it's a great conversation to have, and hopefully we'll inspire some thoughts and some questions. So to talk about this, we have the lovely Gary Chatwin. So Gary, welcome to the Franchise Show. It's lovely to have you here. Have you had a good day? What's been going on?
Thanks, Harvey. It started this morning with my 6-month-old grandson having to change nappies and that sort of thing.
Good stuff.
A bit of an emergency, but part of the joy of life. Thank you for inviting me. It's very kind of you.
Very, very welcome. Before we start recognizing a few people that are here, perhaps you could give us your sort of bit of your background and your take on that franchising funding sort of stack or package that perhaps you could put together. And I think we're going to focus a little bit on the British Business Bank as we go into this. So perhaps give us a little bit of an introduction.
Okay. I've had a fairly interesting career. I started my life in heavy construction equipment, in the marketing side of it, and then into European sales, eventually world sales. Had a spell with Caterpillar. I set up my own business here in the UK, earth moving. Eventually had about 60 machines working on motorway projects, which was quite interesting. Then played snakes and ladders when somebody wouldn't pay me an awful lot of money. So you all the way down, start again. And then I got into business advisory work. When I set up a consultancy in Harrogate in the early noughties with 2 other guys, and we worked in the SME sector, and it was very interesting till the other 2 decided to go off and do their own thing. And I was left thinking, well, shall I retire? So my missus came home one day and said, I'm going to retire from my teaching job. You better get out and find yourself a job. So at that point,
Beat you to it.
She did, sadly. About 8 years ago, I discovered startup loans. And I got a job working with one of the delivery partners of the startup loans company. And my job was to basically evaluate applications. And being entrepreneurial, I thought I need to do a little bit more than that. So I talked to the CEO of the company and said, what about this franchise sector? There's got to be some opportunity there. And he said, well, why not go and have a look? If you can find anything, let's have a try. So I went off to Birmingham to the show at NEC and met a few people. was very interesting. And one or two of them said to me, do you know, it would be a good idea to use these startup loans to fund things, because at the moment I'm funding my new franchisees, and so you're actually going to help fund me, if you like. So I took some of their load off them, and over the last sort of 7 or 8 years, I've grown it to the point where I now deal with 75 franchises. So
Wow.
obviously got something right. So there you go.
Fantastic. Great introduction there, Gary. Thank you for that. And you were mentioning actually before we started speaking about Caterpillar being a franchise brand all those years ago. So you sort of have an early dip into that, didn't you? Before we get into things today, let's just recognise a few people that have joined us early on today. So we've got the lovely Julie Waits. Good evening from the northeast of England. Well, good evening to you too. Great to have you here, Julie. Looking forward to hearing your thoughts on funding and how you put those things together and questions people should ask about funding. We have the wonderful Penny Hopkinson, author of this lovely book. And sponsor of our show. Great to have you here, Penny. Had a lovely conversation with Penny, and Penny's put, hello, Harvey and Gary. Great to be here with everyone. Well, it's great to have you here as well, Penny. And finally, early on, we've got Johnny Joseph here, and Johnny's put, good day to all franchise friends from a very warm Los Angeles. I always like your weather updates from Los Angeles, Johnny, because to me, Los Angeles feels like it should always be sunny, but it is today, maybe, or very warm at least. And Johnny is a franchise auditor. So great to have your thoughts on. He certainly looks at the numbers on that, but great to have your thoughts on sort of funding. So, Gary, if you are, I don't know, let's say you're a franchisee and you're looking for funding for a new venture. I know we've spoken in the past about the British Business Bank. We have an audience here that is US and UK, but let's touch on that briefly. What is the British Business Bank, and how can that help prospective franchisees and franchisors?
Okay, the British Business Bank was set up around about 2010 to help the British government do whatever it needed in the business sector. And one of its interesting arms was the Startup Loans Company, which was set up around about 2012. And it was set up to help people get out of quite often unemployment and benefits and into some forms of small enterprise. The British Business Bank itself basically underwrites everything and is the conduit through which the government channels the money into the sector. The Startup Loans Company itself, I think, does around about 125 million a year. It's quite surprising. It's one of the very few government-funded setups, I'll call it, that actually washes its face. And the reason for that is that all of the delivery partners are charged with making sure that all of the applicants for the loans are suitable, eligible, and have a realistic business opportunity that needs funding. And so to do that, we have to go through a process, which is a process of evaluation. And of course, the franchise sector fits quite nicely into that because of the nature of the beast, if you like. It's any business that wants to expand or be very good has to engage in replicable process. Once you can develop a good process that works and is profitable, obviously you can franchise it. And that then fits nicely into the mold of the requirements of the startup loan scheme, because it is easy to evaluate both what the business is and does and how the finances work.
Oh, fantastic. Great introduction to that. And it's perhaps something that not everybody is aware of, that it exists as an entity. We're going to come back to a question from Johnny in a moment. Just wanted to recognise the fact that we've got the ever wise Simon Wise here. Great to have you here, Simon. And Simon is joining us from Spain, as you can see. He's multilingual today. So hola to you as well. Great to have you here, and looking forward to hearing your thoughts on funding packages and how they affect the franchise industry. So let's go back here to something that Johnny's put. And Johnny's put, what are your biggest challenges with providing franchisees with the funding they need? It's a good question. It's each one, I suppose, is a bit of a challenge, but you know, what sort of things do you come up against that cause you to have some difficulties or some challenges to overcome?
The biggest single challenge is trying to evaluate affordability.
Okay.
Not everybody can get a loan, because there are certain criteria which we have to look into quite deeply to make sure that they can actually afford not just the loan, but what happens if the business isn't successful. So we look very closely into their personal finances to make sure that basically that they're able to run their life well, that they're in charge of their own money and funds, and they operate wisely. It's a sort of a very old-fashioned banking maxim. If you can look after your own money, you can look after ours, is one of the maxims we use. And that's a pretty good judge of whether or not somebody will be able to handle a loan, be able to perform and make the business work to be able to repay it.
No, that's great. It's interesting to hear perhaps something that maybe is a little old-fashioned, but things that are old-fashioned aren't necessarily a bad thing. And if you can look after your own money, then you can look after somebody else's. I like that as a way of looking at things. I just want to recognize a few people here that for some reason I can't bring you up on the screen, but I want to recognize the fact that you're here and say hello. And look at this, clever. I've got another screen over here, so that's why I'm looking over there. So Tim Morris is here today. Great to have you here, Tim. Tim's put, good evening, Harvey and Gary. Looking forward to this. Well, always lovely to have you here, Tim, and looking forward to hearing your thoughts on funding and different challenges that you've had. We've also got Nick Plevin here as well. Nick is one of our lovely sponsors for the show. He's put, sorry, Harvey, I won't be able to join this evening as my flight has been delayed and I'm about to take off. Well, thank you for attempting to join us. And it's always good when you can be here, and look at that. Just because you put a little message on there, I put your logo up on the screen as well. So it's great to have you here, even briefly, Nick. So thank you for that. Let's just go back to the chat now. So the British Business Bank, is that where you specialise now, or do you have other funding areas that you look into as a sort of a funding stack?
My work is principally with the startup loans company, yeah. But as I've sort of developed my round of different franchises, there are other demands within there. So there's the requirements for asset funding, vehicle funding are the two prime ones, And so I've developed connections, liaisons with other individuals who offer these things as well. And so we can go in with package deals to help people to get funded. One of the biggest challenges, I suppose, is in the traditional way of funding business or franchises, the high street banks are the main providers of funds. But under the rules of banking, they can only lend 70% of what is required. So, in other words, if you've got a total requirement of 100,000 for your franchise, then you're going to have to come up with 30,000 yourself. The way that the startup loan scheme works is the loans themselves are personal, unsecured loans for a business purpose. And under the banking rules, we can lend up to 100%. That gives us quite an interesting difference between the high street banks and the startup loans company.
Interesting.
It's because the startup loans company wants to help people, initially, should I say, wanted to start helping people to get out of unemployment and benefits, that they brought this rule in because it then allowed everybody to have access to it, assuming they were eligible in various other ways. Because there are, as you can imagine, quite a lot of different criteria that we have to look at eligibility-wise. But the system itself is quite benign in that way. It wants to help people. It doesn't want to reject. It's an interesting way of looking at lending.
Good. That's really interesting. It's interesting also, franchisors, there's a couple of things I was thinking about here. Franchisors of low-cost franchises could potentially use this to fund a large proportion, if not all, of what is required. And more traditional, perhaps bricks and mortar, higher cost franchises, you're going down that perhaps traditional route of high street lending, but this can be on top of that, so they can still go down the route of high street lending, but this can be something that can be added into that stack of lending options. Is that right?
Yeah. One of the rules of the startup loan scheme is that it does allow you to add a startup loan to any other loan. So we do get that situation where, for example, I'm currently working with a restaurant group. Their overall package price, which includes the fit outs, license fees, various other bits and pieces, is around about 300k. And the directors would go necessarily to the banks to get some of that funding. They'd have some of their own as well, and then they'd look to me for a top up, maybe 25, maybe 50k. I noticed there's a little question in there which is relevant at this moment, and that is, how much can you get?
I'll put it right up now. Isn't that amazing? Hey?
Let's do that one, as if by magic. The answer to that is an individual can get up to £25,000. Okay. Up to 4 directors or individuals can club together, and therefore, in that circumstance, they could get up to 100,000.
Okay, so a maximum of 4 people with a maximum of £25,000 per person if they were partnering in a franchise business. That's a great question, Malcolm, as well. Thanks for putting that question up. And that's really interesting to know that this is on top of traditional lending, on top of unencumbered funds that you might already have set aside for for this business opportunity. Let's have a look at that's a great question, Malcolm. Thanks very much for that, and keep these questions firing in. We've got a couple more that I'm going to bring up here from Tim, who is now actually appearing on screen. And Tim, now I can stop looking at my other screen and put you up in lights where you belong. And Tim's put, Gary, what contribution do you expect franchisees to provide in order to fund the startup of their franchise business? We've sort of touched on this because you actually mentioned, Gary, that if it's a low cost, it could be up to 100% of the business. If there was a franchise that demanded 20 or 25,000 to start it, it could be funded completely with this. Is that what you're saying?
Correct. Yeah, absolutely.
Wow.
Because of the fact that they are personal unsecured loans, means that there is no percentage that needs to be put up as a deposit or a part payment by whoever.
Wow. It's a real game changer, you know, in terms of opportunities that lie ahead for enthusiastic entrepreneurial individuals that have got the skills, have got the enthusiasm, the passion for a business, but unfortunately just haven't got that capital at that moment. You know, if they can put something together, you know, that they've got a chance at starting a business. I mean, it works really well if, like you said, it was originally done for people that, you know, unfortunately had perhaps found themselves in a position where they'd lost their job. But what a question I've got, and I'm definitely going to get to Julie's question as well. But a question I've got is there age limitations for this? You know, if you're
Everybody gets that one.
well, hey, there you go. I'm going to join the crowds. You know, what's the youngest?
It's a minimum age of 18.
Minimum age of 18. Okay, 18. Right. That's interesting. And is there a maximum age? We better talk about that. That's very good.
The oldest one I did was 78.
Oh, wow. 78.
Yeah.
Love
so
that.
Yet, Harvey.
Exactly. Absolutely. I mean, sorry, go on.
No, you carry on. It's your show, not mine.
What I was going to say is that I love the fact that that lower age of 18 there. I'm a huge advocate, and this is definitely going to become a passion, if not a mission for me, to get younger people into franchising. You know, for this to be an option for school leavers, university leavers particularly, right? There are huge volumes of people going through the university system, coming out with amazing qualifications, ready for an exciting life of running their own business or getting an amazing job in the industry they want. But franchising absolutely has to be something that is an option for them, because they get a proven model, they get guidance, they get support. You know, they get a much better chance of success than if they went alone on these things. So, and that's not a pun, by the way. But that's really great to hear that it's open to younger people, you know, because there's so many franchises out there that would appeal to young people. And here's an option. Here's an option, even if they've got a little bit put towards it.
It's definitely something that the younger element ought to take advantage of, because it's there to the average age, I guess, of people who are taking up startup loans is 40 to 50. It tends to get made redundant and start to think, you know, that I've always wanted to work for myself. Now might be the opportunity after a redundancy or with imminent redundancy. That leads to another topic, which is really that a lot of people ask me when I start discussing a startup loan with somebody, and that is, should I put all of my redundancy money into the business, and just take the rest? And that's a difficult one to actually to weigh up. But I always feel that they should always keep some money in the pot, a bit of rainy day money. Nobody has any idea what's around the corner, and therefore it'd be crazy to throw in your lot into something, especially when it will be totally different perhaps to what you've done in the past. Basically you keep some back, because you just never know. And the other thing about that is that if the business is good enough, it should be able to work on full funding as well, which is another interesting one. And I've discovered that over the years of doing this, that a lot of people want to hold on to some of their own cash. Equally, a lot of people want to have a bit more skin in the game, as it were. I personally, I would never stop them from doing it, but I don't tend to have a full discussion with them on how much they should retain and how much they should invest alongside the loan.
Yes, I think it's a really interesting issue. You know, how much do you keep aside, and how much do you put into that business? You know, you're certainly going to need some working capital within it. I mean, will that startup loan cover that working capital element of it? You know, if you had, let's say, a low-cost franchise that was, I don't know, 10,000, but you needed a certain amount for maybe a bit of equipment, and maybe you needed 5,000 for working capital while you were building that business. Is that built into these packages at all?
Generally, yes. What we ask people to do is fill out a personal survival budget, which tells us what they actually need to live on.
Okay.
And we would like to see that is not only covered, but there's a little bit of slack in it, so that as they go through the first 3 months or so of the getting the business off the ground, then they've got a little bit of comfort in a little cushion there as well. But I mean, the way franchises tend to work, especially down at the smaller end of the franchise scale, is that a lot of them already have work for people to go to. I mean, I work with 1 or 2 franchises who, whilst they're training people, they're actually on the phone ringing around getting business for them. So they go out with actually jobs to go to. And that's a good way of getting started as well, because once they know that they're earning money, it's more comfortable for them,
yes,
obviously.
Absolutely.
The ones I don't like are the franchises where they take sort of 6-9 months to mature. That's far too long. I think people need to know that they're going to start getting business in within that first 2 to 3 months. And if a franchise is not helping them to do that in that first 2 to 3 months, then they're not good for anybody, really, I don't think.
Yes, I think it's very interesting. I think that's a question. And you know what this show is all about? Finding questions to ask, not necessarily always about finding those answers, but you know, that's a great question to ask. You know, how long does my working capital, or how, I quite like my personal survival budget, you know, how long does that need to last here? You know, have I got something where I open the door and customers are going to come in straight away? Or does this begin with me starting to search and set things up? You know, some great points you make there.
Well, another good point that leads on from that is really, and it's something I say to a lot of people who are going into business for the first time, and that is this: you're going to borrow a lot of money. How can you cope with sleepless nights? Because at the end of the day, you've got to have that. You've got to be able to feel comfortable with what you're doing. You're taking on a massive commitment, a relatively massive commitment, and things may not go quite the way you want in the early days. You've got to be able to have the comfort of knowing that they can lean on the franchise themselves for early day assistance. And not all franchises are always good at that, as you know. The ones I tend to deal with, I've vetted most of them myself, so I know what they're all about. I've seen their premises, I've seen their training facilities and that kind of thing, because I think that's important. Because I'm part of giving them the imprimatur as well, as when people come to me for a loan, because they would say to me, what do I think of the franchise? And I have to give an opinion, and I'm quite happy to say that most of the ones I deal with, I'm very happy to give an opinion on, because you know, I've seen how they work, And because I've been involved in resales of some of those franchises where people have retired or whatever, I'm able to see the books of a business that's been developed, and there's comfort there as well. So these are all interesting aspects. But certainly the question about how long people can have to survive before the business starts to bring some money in.
It's an important one to answer, isn't it?
It is.
It really is. It is. Very quickly, let me just recognise the fact that we've got Jason Kaber from SEO Samba here, and rather conveniently, your logo's on the screen, my good friend. It's lovely to have you here. And Jason's put, hi, Harvey and Gary. Love to learn where they hide all the money. Well, yes, yeah. Where do they hide all that money? Great to have you here. Looking forward to hearing your thoughts. Jason's over in the US, so interesting to hear your thoughts on sort of funding stacks and how it works across the pond. I'm going to put up lovely Julie's comment, and I said I would, and we are going to get to it. We'll get to everybody's comments. And Julie's put, what type of issues in an individual's personal credit history would immediately prevent them from qualifying for a startup loan? This is interesting because, of course, this is a personal loan, isn't it? So there's going to be, if there's a CCJ or a bad credit history, are they things that can be got over, with a sort of a decent plan, or is that a no-no if you've got one of these things?
Okay. This is one of the fundamentals of the scheme. We are looking for people with a reasonable credit history. And by that, we mean we don't want to see any outstanding CCJs, county court judgments. We can't deal with people who are in personal debt management programs, because obviously that means that they haven't been able to look after their money before. And we're looking for people who are acting responsibly, I suppose, with their own money. So things like, we would look at bank statements, and if there's a lot of direct debits being returned unpaid, that would be a no-no. There are certain formulae that go with this. And another one they don't like, would you believe, is gambling. If there's a lot of instances of gambling on somebody's bank statements, that would we would question that, because what we don't want to be doing is funding a gambling habit. But one of the interesting things about startup loans is that if somebody's had a county court judgment within the last 6 years and it has been paid off, then we can work with them almost immediately.
Okay.
You don't need to wait till it's off the record.
Right.
A useful element to know.
That's a really very interesting thing for people who are looking at this, because I suppose everyone can make a mistake. Everyone can, lose control of things momentarily. But, if you're the type of person that wants to get things back on track, is positive and are looking for, positive things to do, and you've cleared this, then it's great to hear that that's still something that's not just you've got that particular 3 letters on your, on your credit file and it's game over. If you've managed, or if you've been responsible following that, there are perhaps some options. Let's quickly recognize the fact that we've got Don Cohen here. It's great to have you here, Don. Don does a show just before this one. And Don has taught me everything I know about LinkedIn Live. So if you like what I do, please follow Don, connect with Don. He's a lovely chap and he will teach you a lot. Great to have you here, Don. And Don run a very successful tool business in the US. So he knows all about how to scale and grow a business. So great to have you here as well. Gary, sorry, go on.
I wanted to just add in there something about people who apply who have perhaps a very low credit score. And I work with people to help them to improve stuff. It may mean they have to delay things a little bit, but to me, it's just it seems like common sense. What I don't like is the idea of somebody applying because their circumstances aren't good enough, they are immediately declined and therefore have to wait another 6 months. Let's have a look at the your credit file. Let's see what's in there, what can be worked on, what can't be, and see whether we can get you clean within 3 months. And that to me, that's helped a lot of people I know. Sorry to be a nuisance. I'll stop in a moment. But
no, you keep going. This is what we're here for.
When we start looking at people's credit files, an interesting thing, or two interesting things that I have learned are that one, quite a lot of younger people have CCJs that they don't know about, and a lot of the reason for that is mobile phone companies. They perhaps they're at college somewhere, they take out a phone contract, leave college, go back home or wherever, forget the phone, and then there's a CCJ there. And honestly, you'd be amazed how many times that happens. So that's one thing I try and help people to get over. And the other thing is, every time you go on to get finance or personal finance, or you get looking for car insurance, there's an awful lot of stamps put on your credit file from their searches. So you've got to be careful of that, because I saw one the other day where there were about 10 pages of inquiries by insurance companies when somebody had applied for car insurance through one of the consolidation sites.
Wow. Is that where you get the sort of soft searches and hard searches? Is that what that's to do with?
So some do soft and some do hard, but nevertheless they're all there. And
it all has an effect on your credit.
Yeah.
Interesting.
It's only temporary, but nevertheless it's there. I once went on a course to try and learn how to read a credit file, and I came back having more questions than I went with. It's it's an absolute nightmare.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's interesting. It's great to hear that you can look at a credit file, because someone might be thinking out there, I really want to start a franchise, but I had that mobile phone default that I didn't even know about, and it's damaged my credit rating. It's game over for me. Well, it's great to hear that at least there's a conversation. You know, you can look at things, maybe start to build things in other areas for that person, and there is, you know, potential ways of sort of moving forward. I'm just going to read Julie's comment here. Julie's put, thanks Gary, that's really interesting. Second time this week I've heard the comment about gambling showing up on someone's bank statements being an issue, and it makes sense. It's very interesting, isn't it? It's a great warning, but it's a great point to hear, I think, generally, because, you know, gambling could be something as, you know, that's within the realms of control and that's just a bit of fun, or it can be something that is becoming a problem, but clearly being looked at, even if it's just on there, as something that could be a concern. So interesting to have it coming up on there. I mean, is that something, for instance, if you, let's say that you did something, I don't know, once or twice a week, and it was just a bit of fun and it was well within your budgets and so forth, and it clearly wasn't a problem, but it's on there. Is that the sort of thing that you could say to someone, well, look, let's, you know, cut that out of your bank account for the next 3 months, and then that would have a positive effect on the application?
We would certainly suggest to people that they held off from making the application and revise their habits a bit.
Yes.
It doesn't happen. You know, it's one of those things. It's you've got to use a bit of judgment about it. Sometimes if it's a little bit of a week, you know, you're going to have a flutter, you have a tenner a week on the horses or football or whatever. Generally, that's not an issue. It's where there's betting every day. There's lots of money being, and it's a significant portion of their income.
Yes, there's clearly, you know, you could even read something to see that that was one way or another. Let's go to a comment here from Jason. Jason's made a great point and a very interesting one. And Jason's put, which franchise type or industry do lenders prefer to fund? And do you see certain types lenders won't lend to? That's a very interesting question.
It's a
How
good
do you
question.
respond to that one?
I remember a few years ago talking to a friend of mine who was a business manager at Royal Bank of Scotland, and he said, I think at the moment we own every hotel in Newquay, and we're a bit worried. I don't think there's any sector really that they do not either prefer or not prefer. Within startup loans, there are some things we cannot fund, and I'll just give you an idea of what they are. We can't fund things like vaping. We can do nothing. We're not interested in property development. We can't do anything like that. We're not interested in. I think sex shops are in there as well, probably not. And the other thing that we can't fund are franchises where the franchise collects the funds and distributes them to the franchisee. That is seen as agency and not franchising, which is an interesting one. There are some out there. There's quite a few. Because I spot them from the franchise license. When you read through a new franchise license agreement, you can sometimes spot in there how the money works, and they will not accept. The one they mention is Avon Cosmetics.
Okay.
That is purely an agency. You take the orders, the money goes to the owner of the business, and they pay you eventually.
I see. I get it.
So so it's worth knowing.
That is worth knowing. That's worth knowing as well. If you're watching this and you're an entrepreneur looking at franchising your business and you're considering the two different models, because they are two different models. It's worth considering that, certainly as it stands when we're talking in the context of, and we are today talking in the context of the British Business Bank. If you have just joined us, this is the Franchise Show, and we are talking franchise funding, and in particular the British Business Bank, with the lovely Gary Chatwin, and we've had a fantastic conversation today. So I'm glad that everybody has joined us today, and if you have just joined us, you can catch the replay. Somebody who has just joined us that can't be here, and I can't find their comment on here, so I'm going to read it from this side, is Sanjay. And Sanjay's put, hey Harvey and Gary, sorry not able to make this one. Finance and funding are my bread and butter, so would have loved to have joined. We'll play back the event this week. Enjoy. Well, always good to have you with us, Sanjay. Thanks for being with us in spirit and at the end, and enjoy the replay and come back if you've got any thoughts. My goodness, the time has flown by today. We are getting towards the top of the hour. I'm going to end with a question that you're going to have to answer fairly quickly now, Gary. But the process, what does the process look like in terms of you're a franchisee, you want to apply for this? We're going to go through a little bit at the end how people get in contact with you as well. So we'll do that right at the end. But the actual process, what does that look like?
Okay. The process itself involves, I take them on, new applicants on, and I work with them in 3 steps. First step, I check their documentation to make sure it's compliant with the needs of the scheme. Second step is to register them with the scheme through my link, and go through the credit check, because that is the ultimate eligibility check. And then the third one is I work with them to prepare their business plan in the templates of the scheme. My bit generally takes about a week, usually less. Then it goes off to be assessed by the delivery partner. The assessment then Depends which delivery partner people are with. Mine gets my people through in usually about 3 days, and then it goes off to the underwriters. So normally I would expect somebody starting the process with me to get from start to cash usually about 2 to 3 weeks.
Oh, wow.
I've actually had people go through the process in 2 days.
Gosh.
Yeah, not many of them, but I've had half a dozen this year.
But even 2 to 3 weeks is pretty quick.
Well, 2, 3 weeks, but 2 days is even better, isn't it? I mean, I'd like to get them all like that. But that's a case of understanding how it all works. And that's why I can get people through generally a lot quicker than most. If people try and do it themselves, they can get caught in a loop over documentation. That's some of the worst stuff. I'll just give you an example while I'm there. A very quick one. People from Eastern Europe tend to have double-barreled names. When they get here, they drop the hyphen. And of course, it's still in their passport. So if it's not in their bank statement as it is in their passport, they'll get stopped.
You see, these are interesting little things, and if you put the application through yourself without using somebody who's a specialist, then you could fall at a hurdle that's not very tall.
Well, you can certainly be delayed by a hurdle, and that delay can take 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks.
No, absolutely.
So there you go.
Yeah. We don't normally touch on this, but I happen to know the answer to this question there or thereabouts, and I am going to ask it because I think it's less than people are going to imagine. That the process of getting someone to guide them through this British Business Bank process, what's the sort of costs involved in a rough format for that?
Okay. Well, I charge in two bits. I charge for the first bit, which is to check the documentation. And for that, I charge £125. They do the credit check and stuff themselves. And the fact that the waiting for the answer to the credit check is the longest 3 minutes of their life, it would be a shame to charge them. And then the final bit for the business documents and everything else like that, I charge £175.
Fantastic. Look,
that is per person.
Yeah, no, that's great. I, as I say, I don't normally get into that, but I did because it's not perhaps as much as people think. Well, look, we are starting to draw towards the end. Have we got time for one more question? Or we've got to do it because it's important to get everybody's questions in when they've spent the time here. So Julie's put this question here. Now, this relates, you were saying, Gary, about the fact that if the franchisee has a system where they collect the money and distribute it to the franchisee, what about if the payment is made centrally through the franchisor's central website, and then a payment system like Strip is used to apportion the payment between the franchisee and the franchisor re ongoing fees? Is that going to be similar? Is that still in the same sort of court as the other situation, or would that work for this scheme?
No, it would not work.
Okay.
Because the payment has to go directly to the franchisee.
Okay.
Directly from the customer, from their client, customer, or whatever, directly to the franchisee. Any other method is not acceptable. I have one which, so in some trades, there can be insurance payments, and that can be difficult as well. Believe it or not. So no, it's got to be directly to the franchisee.
Fantastic. Thank you for answering that.
Good question.
Yeah, great question. Well, look, we have now drawn to the end. So what I'd like to do, if it's okay with you, Gary, is just give you a chance now to let people know the best way to get hold of you, to start asking some questions about this process, and then we'll tell a few people about what's going to go on next week.
Okay, easiest way to get me is to telephone me. I'll give you the number if you're ready. It is 07787 526 163. I'll do it again. 07787 526 163. Just drop me a text or give me a call anytime. And
Perfect.
where do we go?
Sounds fantastic. Thank you so much, Gary, for your time today. It's been a fascinating chat, and I really hope it's something that adds value if you've watched this live or if you're watching this in the future as well. Before we finish up today, let's see who's on next week. You can hear me flicking through my actual diary, a physical one here. And it's Aisha Bascaro, and she is running the wonderful Franchise Academy in the US, which is something that looks at the things that franchisors don't necessarily train you on, those softer skills. So it's going to be a fascinating conversation. So please join us next Tuesday, 5:15 GMT, 12:15 EST for that. And of course, we have franchising brand stories on a Thursday. So please join us this Thursday for Franchising Brand Stories, where we're going to hear the story behind the bike fitters, Barry Price. So that's going to be a fascinating conversation, a lovely story to hear. So join us same time, 5:15 GMT, 12:15 EST for that story. I'd like to thank everyone who was in the audience today. I'd like to thank you again, Gary, for your time, and we will see you next time. Take good care, everyone. Cheerio.
Bye.